How's it going, everyone? My name's Mel, and you're listening to Free Kick, the AFLW Fantasy Podcast. Tonight, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Will and Liam. How's it going, guys?
Going very well, thanks, Mel.
I'm going amazingly. The Bombers are flying high, and therefore I am the same.
Excellent. I love how your mood is always dictated by a footy team and nothing else.
That's normal, right?
As it should be. As it should be.
What else could be important? Today, we're going to have a chat through the supplementary draft. So ahead of season 8, we've seen the AFLW manage the draft a couple of months ago now, actually, I think, in early April. And so we've seen a lot of very interesting faces come up after that draft. So we want to have a chat through who some of them are, which teams they've been selected for the roles, and who we think is most fantasy relevant from different sections.
So for those who are a little bit out of the loop on this, the draft this year wasn't a standard draft. We didn't have the usual, under 18s getting picked. We were picking, teams were picking players from around the state leagues or from who have formerly played in the AFLW just to top up their lists, given the way the seasons have changed in terms of the way the seasons are actually placed in the year.
And for those of you that have been listening to every episode and have been following us on socials, sorry, but you're going to hear us repeat this a lot. This season is, again, quite different. Last year it was new teams, and now it's a very, very different draft crop. No 18-year-olds, no people coming off, an elite underage season coming straight in and being their best midfielder. It's a very different kettle of fish this year.
Yeah, which I think will also make it a little bit more easy to manage because we're not going to have any kids trying to balance year 12 and playing elite footy, because that was a very interesting challenge last season. But so, yeah, should be a bit more, I guess, normal.
Normal for them, not helpful for us.
Yeah, not normal for us in the slightest.
Oh, no, yes.
So it's a very pro-player message there, Mel. I really do commend you. And as fantasy players, rude.
Yeah, I know. How boring. So breaking it up then, because there are about 26 or so draftees coming through. So we're going to break this up into a few picks at a time. And because we thought it would be hilarious, we'll get the person who has a track record of butchering every name that she tries to say to read out all of these names. So that should be entertaining. Okay?
And for anyone that thinks it's cruel that Mel's doing this, yes, I designed it that way. But I would also like it known that I asked Mel about 5 minutes before we were going to start recording, did she want to do a practice run of the names beforehand?
Yes, which was appreciative. Good thing you know me.
Preparation is key.
Yes. Prepare your co-hosts for their weaknesses. Oh, good. Okay, well, in that case, the first 6 picks we have were Erin Hoare picked as ruck for Geelong, Jasmine Stewart as a midfielder for Port Adelaide, Talia Mulder as a midfielder for Freo, Matea Breed as a forward for the Hawks, Lulu Beatty as a defender for Carlton, and Cara McCrossan as a forward for the Gold Coast. Obviously, I'm going to throw to you, Will, to start off with Erin Hoare, someone who we have been trying to get an interview with, and a player for your team. What do you reckon about her?
Yeah, for the number one pick, and probably the oldest number one pick in draft history, comes in with a lot of experience, has played for both Melbourne and Geelong in the AFLW in the past before taking some time off for her studies. Basically, Geelong need ruck depth. With Kate Darby coming towards the end of her career, a lot of the ruck load will fall on Olivia Fuller, who has done a fantastic job for Geelong, but if she succumbs to an injury, they're basically going to have no ruck. So they've brought in a player they know can perform for them. She's an excellent tap ruck, one of the tallest players to ever play AFLW. And if she gets... How
tall?
I do believe she's 190 centimetres.
190, 191.
Damn.
Yeah. Incredibly tall. And has a history of being able to score reasonable scores in the fantasy game. Back when she played for Geelong, was able to score sort of 50s and 60s as an upper, which as a rookie player you'd take every day of the week.
In your esteemed Geelong opinion, Will, what is the likelihood that we see full games of Erin as a ruck. And if she's not going to play full ruck, does she have some positional versatility that means that she might be a worthwhile pick at a basement price, or is that unlikely?
Look, I think that they're likely to continue doing what they did with Kate Darby, and I think a lot of it will come down to the fitness and the longevity of Kate Darby, because they like to play a ruck up forward. So I think it's always hard to say that a backup ruck is going to play full games. So I think that there probably will be other ruck options out there, such as Fleur Davies, who we've talked about, who might be better rookie options. But in terms of known quantities and known ability to score, is the one thing I do like about Erin Hoare as a potential option.
Yeah. I just think that I was kind of hinting at it. I don't know if she's got another position to play.
Yeah.
At 191 centimetre former netballer, I think it would be unlikely if we saw a substantial amount of her as a number one ruck.
Yep.
If we do,
I completely agree.
If we do, that's great. That's 25 points of upside, but I think that's probably where it's going to be limited.
Yeah. And I actually think, to me, Erin Hoare is probably more likely to be a downgrade target if she gets games later in the season. To me, is probably more where her value will be.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a really interesting dynamic with these draftees, because some of them are coming in from former AFLW clubs. So we're getting the basement prices that we know how they play, where their strengths are and stuff like that. And having some of these, I guess, not so many young'uns coming in that are quite unknowns means that we can be looking like when we see Erin Hoare get named ahead of a game, if she's named in the ruck, you kind of know that potential and that she could be a good cheap pickup, because she will be coming in basement priced. So there's a couple of those that we'll be running through.
Yeah. But I also think for someone like Erin Hoare, she comes with some extra unknowns, in that she's not played competitive football since 2019. She didn't play a VFL. She's not come off a VFLW season. She's kind of just jumped right back into it, and she's clearly got the talent. She's an athlete. But yeah, it's a big unknown. But of all of the people here who've played AFLW list before, she's by far and away the biggest name and the best fantasy player.
Yeah, so what about you then from that list, Liam? Who do you think's interesting from a fantasy perspective?
I'm going to probably start a trend for the rest of this episode, in that I'm going to talk about a player from Carlton. So Lulu Beattie, she is a 171 centimetre defender, halfback. She comes in as a relevant player because Carlton don't have a lot of players that are worthy of being, they've got a very unknown list. They lost Brooke Brown in free agency. They lost...
Brooke Brown was from North.
Not Brooke Brown. Oh, my goodness.
Lucy McAvoy.
No, they lost Lucy McAvoy, but what's the other... There's another Brooke.
Harry.
Came to them. No, she went to Essendon. Not Brooke Brown. They've lost a bunch of defenders. Lucy McAvoy is gone.
I know who you're talking about.
Why can't I remember her name? She's gone to the Bombers. By the by, they've got a lot of depth issues at Carlton, and from what I've read about Lulu, she looks like Brooke Walker, that's it. I'm just of the mind that Carlton are going to have to be throwing the chips around, and she comes in basically as an underage player. She was the co-captain of the Northern Knights in the Talent League and at Nationals Carnivals. And Carlton have already talked about how much they rate her work rate and football IQ. If we end up with another season where we're really struggling for rookie price defenders, I think someone going to Carlton and being a rookie price player means that there'll be an option. Now, we don't really have that much to go off. She's not played that many games in the VFLW, but I think it's worthy of she's worthy shout.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a case for a lot of these draftees, is we don't really know a lot about them necessarily beyond VFLW form, so how that translates is once again a big unknown. But as you say, she's highly rated, so I see no reason why she can't be a defensive option early in the season, especially if she gets game time early.
Yeah, and Unfortunately, while we were recording that first bit, my internet died, and so my notes that I had about her went disappearing. But in terms of her scoring in the VFLW, she's only played 10 games. Half of them were at Darebin. The rest have been at Carlton. She's got a ceiling of the low 70s and put up a couple of other scores in the 60s, which I would say you probably have to at least halve that. But we're always looking for defender options, and that next defender option that takes kick-ins, that's someone we've got to look at. Yeah. So that's why I've gone with Lulu Beattie.
Yeah, and a 40-point rookie's gold dust, basically.
Yeah.
You'd take that every day of the week.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned it, that there's going to be a recurring theme of talking about some of the Carlton draftees here, because, I mean, of the teams that had a pick in the draft, Carlton got 4 and Freo got 4. So it's very heavily weighted towards Carlton players to be picking from. And looking down the list of the people that we want to be talking through, we've got a couple of Freo ones as well. So it's going to be an interesting season for those two teams, looking at their fresh talent coming in. Maybe we'll move on to, well, talking to Freo, we'll move on to the next couple of picks. So 7 to 13, we had Emmelie Fiedler going as a ruck to Freo, who have actually had the amazing opportunity to interview. So stay tuned and listen for that one. Caitlin Miller going in as a forward to GWS. Madeline Hendry as a forward for Carlton. Mira Gervin, defender for Gold Coast. Dominique Carruthers, yes, as a midfielder for the Bulldogs. Caitlin Pope as a forward for Port Adelaide, and Larry Morris as a forward for Collingwood. What do you guys reckon here?
I'll take that. I'll take that. Will, you got the first one last time. Thanks for the throw, Mel. So
Liam specifically.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Well done. Thank you.
For those listening at home, for those listening at home, both of us were just sitting there looking at each other, going, "Which of us are going to go here first?" We're just
My homework as a host, waiting to throw to someone,
waiting for Mel to just send it onwards. But Liam, off you go.
Oh, thank you, Will. That's a beautiful throw.
You're welcome.
I wanted to talk about the wonderful interviewee, Emmelie Fiedler. And I want to talk about her because very similarly wanting to talk about Erin for Geelong is Freo's ruck depth is not incredible. Freo have Mimstrom, and then they've got 2 key position players who have been rucks in the past, but don't ruck predominantly in games. So they've got Sarah Vielstra and they've got Anya Teig. So what they've gone and done is, as all, traditional teams do, they look for rucks who've played almost no Australian rules football to date and look for the kind of raw talent. And that's what Fiedler is. She's only played, I think this is her 3rd season of properly organised football in Australia. She learned to play in Malaysia. And yes, I'm surprised as well. Did not know that Malaysia had a football league you could join. You'll hear more about that in the interview.
Just a team.
Just a team. Just a single team in Malaysia, and they've got a Southeast Asian competition. But what I was really impressed by is watching some of her highlights. You can see that she is a very natural athlete, and her tap ruck work is like pretty immaculate, and she is hitting it to like proper targets in the Waffle W, because in her team, the number 1 midfielder is Gab O'Sullivan, who is playing through the Waffle W at East Fremantle to get back her form. And her highlights are as good as you will see in like secondary level women's football. So I was really interested, and she has a fantasy average of close to 60, which again, you're probably going to halve it, but I just think that in the off chance that Mimstrom does go down, there is a very real possibility that Fiedler plays. And I think she's someone that maybe she doesn't play that many games this year, but if we're going to talk about her now, I think she's someone we're going to talk about in a few years, because there was a lot of talent when I watched bits of footage.
Yeah, and I think you can probably talk to this a bit more, Mel, but if they're having to play someone like Anya Teig in the ruck when she's so valuable as a forward, they're probably really struggling, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that would be concerning, and even what we heard from the back of Emily's interview about how excited she is for Anya Teig to be playing more forward time and kicking more goals. So we probably won't see her, Anya, ending up in the ruck. But I will just note that it's interesting of the two of the couple of draftees we've spoken about so far, two of them are rucks. So we've got Erin Hoare and Emmelie Fiedler, who we're expecting to be, I guess, from a fantasy perspective, named in that position, which puts a little bit of pressure on, I guess, team building when you've got potentially two impressive-looking rookie options coming in, but they're unfortunately both in the ruck position.
I actually think that this is one of the things we've found in our time playing this AFLW fantasy game is that the downgrades mid-season have been critical, and the ruck downgrades in particular have been really challenging because a lot of the time you're essentially picking a player who's probably going to come in for one game, score a 20, and then never be seen again. And so with a player like Fiedler, with a player like Erin Hoare, they're the sorts of players that because they've got a bit more experience, they actually might be able to stick around for a few games, make you that money mid-season, and that's a really critical thing in this game.
I agree with you 100% with Erin Hoare having more experience, but I'm not sure the same is true of Fiedler. I think she might be missing like pure games experience, but I get what you mean. Like,
absolutely.
This is kind of what we're scouting here is like the second level a lot of time. Like player comes in, does half a season, gets into the team, and then looks good. Like we're talking example, and it was on the last episode with Mick Carrain, Bly Mackin. She didn't come in until round 4 or 5 last year, and yeah, she was rookie. She scored like 35 points, but that's the player that sometimes you need to get on because with hard lockouts, you can't flip and do last-minute trades to bring in someone better on your trades. You need emergencies.
But I guess, and that's the other thing, that's also a really valid point as well, Liam, is you never know that whether the $3,000 or $4,000 that 35 gets might be the difference between you getting to the player you need. And getting those trades right is critical, and that's where these ruck trades could be super important later in the season.
So, Will, since I threw it to Liam to begin with, let's now throw to you specifically. Who do you reckon's interesting from that bunch?
Oh, me.
Excellent specific throw there, Mel.
Very
10
good.
out of 10.
I don't have another ruck to talk about in this lot, which is a bit disappointing. So I've decided to, once again, stay close to home, and I've gone for Collingwood's draftee, Illyri Morris. And the reason I've gone for Illyri Morris is the Pies need forwards. Simple as that. They've lost Chloe Malloy up forward. They've lost Jordan Membry up forward. Their forward structure is a big unknown at the moment, and it's going to be super interesting to see how that shapes up over the preseason. But Illyri Morris is a player that they're quite highly rating internally. She has played through Collingwood VFLW. She's basically one of those players that knows how to hit the scoreboard, kicked 19 goals in 13 games in the VFLW last season. So she knows how to kick goals. She's got good forward craft, and that's the sort of thing that if you've got a forward line that is a little bit, variable, she could come in early and genuinely make a difference. So to me, keep an eye on Illyri Morris to make an early impact at the Pies.
It obviously comes with the key forward risk that we saw it even last year with like Gabby Newton comes out great first 2 rounds and then has an absolute stinker. Just looking at Ellery's fantasy stats from the VFLW this year, kind of has a round 3 where she kicks a goal, has 19 touches, 9 marks, 5 tackles, and scores 94. But just the week prior, she'd had 34 points, which in the AFLW could be 12,
15. Yep, and I think that's the thing is that you're going for a player like this because they're bottom priced, and a 30 point average for a bottom priced rookie forward might get you 3 or 4 weeks of cash generation. You'll take that. But yeah, the key forward, we talk a lot about it, as you say, Liam. But key forwards are always really interesting fantasy prospects because they can go massive, but they can also put in some absolute stinkers.
And the fantasy community is well aware of that risk. I'm talking to all those people that bought in Fetty Frew after she'd scored a 60 the week prior, and I think it was a single-digit score the week after that.
I think it was like a 4.
I think it might have been 3 or something.
It was. It was not good, and you were warned, and you'll be warned again, and we will all make the same mistakes for different reasons again and again and again, and that's why we love doing this.
Just brought up the stats. She scored a 56 against Geelong, and everyone thought, oh yeah, Butte, she's playing Sydney next week. Sydney's struggling a bit, and as you say, Liam, 3 points.
Yep, I should have remembered the 3
That
given she was in my
bitterness.
team. I just remember it being low. Anyway, yeah, so lesson learnt, maybe. So looking at the third bucket of picks here, we've got Selena Carlson as a defender going to Collingwood, Georgie Jacks, the third and final ruck of this draft, going to Port Adelaide, Poppy Bolts as a midfielder to Brisbane, Jay Flynn as a defender to Freo, Christy Stratton as a midfielder to Hawks, Mariana Anthony as a midfielder to Carlton, and Bethany Pynchon as a defender to St Kilda. Will, tell us about Poppy Bolts.
Yeah, Poppy Bolts is the one I'm excited for, and the reason I'm excited for Poppy Bolts is basically for what we talked about in our trade free agency episode, which is there's a midfield spot on offer at Brisbane, and Poppy Bolts is one of those options. Whether she can fill it with the likes of an Ellie Hampson coming in, who knows? But I've watched some of the highlights, and she's an explosive midfield player, and I really like the look of her. So one to keep an eye on. If she gets into that midfield, I think she could be a really good option.
Hey Mel, are you okay if I kick Will out of our group chat for not mentioning Beldors? Because she is the one who's going to replace. That is slanderous. That is offensive.
I actually heard that's going to be the new draftee ahead of Beldors.
It's not Beldors. No. Not a high draft pick player in a near premiership side. No. Or it's not super highly talented Hampson, who we can see has, as good a kick as anyone in the state of Queensland. No. It'll be the rookie draftee. Yes, that's who it will be. I can understand we're doing this to create content, but the fact that you just mentioned Hampson and not Dawes, you deserve this.
See, the reason I went for Hampson was because she was a new recruit rather than being one of the other ones. I'm gonna.
Dawes has her spot there.
I'm gonna wheel myself back a little bit here, but yeah, I do quite like the look of Poppy Bolts, and she has played alongside a lot of the Brisbane girls in the past, which to me is a good thing. It means that she's got some level of synergy with the team. Hopefully, won the best and fairest up in the Cairns football competition, and was playing for Southport in the Quaffle. So she's had a pretty quick rise up through the ranks to get to the AFLW. So a good potential player there if she does play over the likes of Dawes and Hampson and whoever else can fit into that Brisbane midfield.
I'd just like you to know that there was a perfect out for you if you remembered your research, which is she's played with a lot of the Brisbane girls before because she was at the Suns Academy. So you could have been like, oh, but I was grouping these ex-Suns, now Brisbane Lions, and that's why I drew the link. I wasn't disrespecting Beldors. But no, you didn't have that in your back pocket.
So the reason what I'm actually going to say is because you guys told me to shut up and not waffle, so I just decided to keep my list from several down to one. But yes, no disrespect to Beldors, excellent player. I love her, and I look forward to seeing her in that midfield alongside Poppy Bolts.
Right next to Poppy Bolts.
And you know what? And you're kicking out Ellie Anderson now? Like, are you trying to offend every single midfielder?
Ellie Anderson's the third, and Ellie Hampson is going to be doing what Ellie Hampson does, which is playing everywhere across the field and frustrating Liam.
Yep. Pretty much.
You're like, I can't disagree with that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Sorry,
on that
guys.
note, Liam, I gather you've got yet another Carlton player to talk us through.
I do. And you know what makes it even better? It's a Carlton player who spent 3 years at the Essendon VFLW side in Mariana Anthony. So, Maz Anthony comes in having actually switched this past year to North Melbourne's VFLW side. But before playing Australian football, she was a soccer player. She will play off half-back, has played also as an outside mid. And when Carlton drafted her, the head of their list management at the time said, she can play a number of roles, inside midfielder, outside midfielder, and then also slotting in across half-back. I think that's a great place to start. Obviously, she was part of that Essendon side that was dominant before the beginning of the Bombers AFLW campaign. She comes in this year averaging 80 fantasy points and 15 possessions a game. Like, for the same reasons that I wanted to talk about Lulu, I think the same applies for Mariana Anthony.
Yeah, can't argue with that.
Particularly if she's named as a defender, she has a 100-plus point ceiling just this year. And we know that Carlton need additional talent. Now, I don't think the job security will be there because I think they have just such a big list of unknowns that there will be a lot of churn and burn. But I wouldn't say no, and now you know to watch out for her. Like, she's got the ceiling. She's kind of got what we want to see from her, for fantasy-wise.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the question there is, if she is named as a midfielder, is that as an attractive a prospect?
It's a little bit tougher. I think we will have some options, but given the narrative we were just discussing, which is we're looking for downgrades, she comes in round 4, round 5, plays 3 games, makes us some amount of dollars, then we could probably bring her in as a midfielder, particularly when we've got like 2. Usually we're running 2 mids as a midfield, as a 6th midfielder, and then utility as well.
True. I have a question to throw to you, Will, unprepared.
Excellent.
Selena Carlson is one of these other players that has some AFLW experience before, having played a little bit for the Bulldogs and Saints. She's coming into Collingwood, which I know you know quite a bit about.
Yep.
Coming in as a defender in a team that didn't really trade out or lose any defenders, as far as I know, between the seasons. So potentially, interesting that she's coming in, not filling an obvious gap, has some experience. What do we think about her? Do we know roughly where she's going to play given this experience?
Yeah, everything that I've heard about Selena Carlson is they're basically treating her as the immediate replacement for when Stacey Livingston retires. So they're basically bringing her down into the senior setup, having come from Collingwood VFLW, to basically do an apprenticeship under Stacey Livingston alongside some of those other defenders. May play a few games this year depending on injuries and form of players. But my understanding is they're basically looking at her going, as soon as we lose Stacey Livingston, who is in the twilight of her career, we'll basically have a almost exact copy player to put straight in to replace her. So hard to say whether she's going to have much of an impact this year. And as a tall defender, lockdown defender, I'm not sure a fantasy impact is really going to be there anyway. But
and especially if she's mimicking a not super relevant fantasy players.
Exactly.
Role and behaviors,
So my assumption is that maybe you'd pick her if you're desperate for a downgrade later in the season to make you a couple of $1,000. But yeah, to me, she's one of those players that her impact will be doing the defensive things, not taking marks, scoring fantasy points.
Yeah. Nice. Interesting. So looking at our last lot here, we've got Joanne Craig as a midfielder for Freo, Anise Bradfield as a midfielder for GWS, Ruby Tripodi as a mid-forward for North Melbourne, Shelby Knoll as a forward for Richmond, Chloe Wrigley as a midfielder for Carlton, Yvonne Bonner as a forward for Adelaide, and then we've got 2 free agency down here, Bree McFarlane as a forward for the Bulldogs, and Maggie Gorham as a free agency forward for the Bulldogs as well. I was doing so well, but we got through most of that without any issues. So yeah, quite a few here. Who are you thinking, Liam?
Well, I was actually thinking I'm going to throw it straight back to you because you've got interest in Anise Bradfield, which we talked about on our first episode of Season 8.
We did. So when we were doing the trade period review, she was one that I was able to bounce off some of the stats you provided earlier as well. But she looks particularly interesting because she has played a couple of the games last season. So in terms of these players where we know kind of that they have an AFLW history and what they can look like on the field, she's one who's got very recent history there, which when paired with your stat around her being able to get a good chunk of the CBAs at times, you know, when other players are out, makes me think that she could be good potential. However, we have the 2 red flags attached to it, which is midfielder, so that listing will make her potentially a little bit more difficult. And I guess GWS. Will?
I just wanted to say I'm gonna throw a bit of a Liam here and say, do you know what her fantasy scores look like, Mel?
I'm going to say fantastic, and that therefore that fully supports my one opinion.
So she's played 5 games with that 165
That's all you need.
60
Still timing.
that one. Sorry, no, the 65% CBA game she scored a 50.
Okay, solid. That would be good.
It's good numbers.
Good numbers. She's got 4 other games. In those 4 games, she scored 2 8s, a 7, and a -3.
So it sums to less than 50.
At least they net out positive.
They do net out positive. But I think one of the things here for me is Anise Bradfield, I think, has been recruited to give her that opportunity. And I think that she's always been quite highly rated. And playing for a team like the Gold Coast, where they were still establishing themselves, didn't have much midfield time. If she does get that midfield time, as we've seen in that West Coast game where she did score that 50, she does know how to get that ball. And she also had eight tackles in that game as well, sorry. So there is scoring potential there. And the other thing I just want to quickly say about this one is I think a lot of it will come down to how Rebecca Beeson recovers from her concussions. Because if she's once again missing out and they're still looking for midfield options in there, she might really come into contention, especially early in the season.
And that was kind of the point I made, was that there was a few kind of people out of the team, and if Beck Beeson's a question mark, then there is the potential for that to come into there. However, I've just realised that when you guys were encouraging me to mention Anise Bradfield in this section, all you wanted me to do was bring it up so that you could cut me back down with those scores.
I'm going to say that to Liam because I decided to go look at it because I was like, man, that sounds really good when she got all those stats. And I saw her stats and went, ooh, some of those are a bit iffy.
Oh, I'm 100% sure Liam knew what he was doing with that.
I reckon
But
Liam
he
did.
can't defend himself because his internet's cut out. So let's just move along. Will, who do you reckon's interesting there?
Speaking of Liam, he was originally going to do another Carlton player in this section, but decided that he would give everyone else an opportunity to do Carlton players. So I'm gonna talk to Chloe Wrigley, who has been selected as a midfielder for Carlton. So she's put up some really good numbers in the Waffle W in recent seasons. Just in the game before being drafted, she had 23 touches, but more importantly for us, 17 tackles, which is fantasy gold. That's fantastic stuff. Yeah. And she also averaged 7 tackles across her across the season in the Waffle W. So tackles as a midfielder are fantastic. Has played 50 games in the Waffle W, so plenty of experience playing against those more experienced players, and Carlton just desperately need midfield help. So again, Carlton need everything, so they're always a shout to get early game time.
That's actually quite exciting because, I mean, the weather, the climate playing in WA, it's obviously still going to be some wet weather footy, but it's going to be less. And so you bring that kind of tackle machine mentality into a bit of a wetter season, or the potential to be, depending on where the games are played, and that could be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this could be a bit of a Tam Smith situation where we've got a player who mightn't get huge numbers of the ball, but if they're putting up, between 6 to 8 tackles a game, that's going to do you really well.
That does it, yeah.
Oh, Liam's
back.
What you need. Liam's back. How's it going, Liam?
I'm back. I heard that I was being ripped, and I was not able to defend myself. I just thought it would be interesting to talk about Anise Bradfield because I knew you had thoughts about her, Mel. I did not share the stats that Will shared when we talked about her last time because I wasn't feeling like being rude.
Well, colour me shook. I don't believe that for a second.
But yes,
look, I did actually want to make. I actually cut my internet out intentionally because I only want to talk about Carlton in this episode. But I think the one thing you've really got to watch out for with a player like Chloe Wrigley is that she comes in at not a particularly tall player and lays a lot of tackles. Great. Probably only great if she's in the midfield because that's the type of player that if they get forced to play as a small forward,
absolutely score plummets. Score plummets.
And if they're playing in a bad side and they use a tackling to get a lot of their score, usually that's a great combo. But you need proximity to the ball, and if you're not if you're at the other end of the ground, then you could get some really, really lumpy scoring. But I think the Waffle W stats, like, they're a little bit more difficult to come by, and the fantasy stats are not immediately calculated for us. But we know that she has a ceiling. Any person that can tackle 17 times in a game has a fantasy ceiling if they play.
Yeah, we'll put it this way: without having the actual fantasy stats, in the 2022 Peel Thunder season, she was averaging 19 disposals and 7 tackles. That's great numbers for a midfielder, and if that can translate to being a midfielder for Carlton, then you've probably got yourself a really good option there.
So, Liam, now that you're back, do you want to talk to us about Ruby Tripodi again?
Again, as though I've already discussed her. I was just into dead space.
Nailed it.
Jesus, guys, I'm real flustered. I've had the just.
There's going to be so much editing, but I hope that makes it in.
That's not making it in.
For those of you at home, Liam has had so many internet problems, and it's a credit to his editing skills that this episode sounds as wonderful as it does.
Coming back to what we're all really here for, I think I really wanted to talk about her because I reckon that she has, again, got some of that fantasy scoring potential. She's won back-to-back best and fairest at Williamstown's VFLW side. She's got a fair bit of positional versatility, and I think it kind of went underrated last year how young North Melbourne's side was. And I do think that there will still be some spots up for grabs on half-back, on a wing, or on the half-forward line. And I think that coming in as a 21-year-old who's played a bit of basketball and has looked really good as a midfielder at Williamstown, I think she is one to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I agree with that. And while she does have that same issue that we talked about with Chloe Wrigley, which is if she does end up in a forward line position that's not as fantasy scoring, that may affect things. But thankfully, we do expect North to be once again one of the stronger sides going about, so it's not as detrimental in the North Melbourne side.
And I would also say that having now done a bit of reading on her since the draft, it's pretty clear that she has that positional versatility, and that at her time at Williamstown, she has played in multiple different roles. And I think it's testament to the fact that she basically doesn't have games where she has less than 13, 14 touches during the game quite regularly when playing or named on a half-forward line and then drifting into the midfield. She's getting 20, 25 touches during the game. I think that's a testament to someone who does know how to accumulate the ball and will come in as a 21-year-old as opposed to an 18-year-old who will probably get pushed around a fair bit more. And peel back the curtain, if all things go well, we will also be having an interview with her just after we record this episode in the next 48 hours.
Yeah, so that actually is a good segue into a bit of the plan. So now that we've whipped through the recruits that we've had, now that we've whipped through the draftees that we've had coming into season 8, we're actually having a couple of interviews. So we'll be able to release some of those as little bonus episodes, which is very exciting to be hearing from a couple of girls ahead of their first season. Ruby Tripodi hopefully being one. But at the end of this episode, you can listen to our interview. Will and I had a good chat with Emmelie.
I didn't.
Nope,
No,
Liam
I
and
did.
I.
Yeah,
Sorry, Liam.
I'm that forgettable.
I did. I was great on that interview. I thought it was fantastic.
You did absolute minutes of pure gold, Will.
Yep. So Liam and I had a great interview with Emmelie Fiedler.
Oh, we did actually.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was very good content. Very good content.
No, it was great. It was great. Have a listen to it. We'll chuck it at the end of this episode, and we'll be able to release some of the other ones that we've had as we go. So, might wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening to another pre-season episode of Free Kick, the AFLW Fantasy Podcast. As always, you can find us on Instagram, where we have a lot of our content with the players, as well as Twitter, which will be ramping back up as the season gets ahead and we start posting some more of the fantasy specific content over there. You can find me on Insta as HiMelD.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at WillH_VI.
And you can find me on Twitter at LiamAFLW Fantasy.
Very nice. Well, thanks for chatting, everyone. Bye.
Bye, and enjoy the interview.
Yes.
See ya.
Hello and welcome, Emmelie. How's it going?
Good. Yeah. Hi, everybody.
So today I get the pleasure of interviewing Emmelie, who's recently been drafted to Freo. And we're joined by my co-host, Liam. How's it going, Liam?
G'day, Mel. G'day, Emily. Lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for joining.
No worries.
So we've obviously been able to hear a little bit about your journey before because you've done a bit of a radio thing in the past. But for any of our listeners that haven't had the pleasure of listening to that, tell us a little bit about yourself and your AFLW journey today.
Sure thing. So obviously my name's Emily. Born and raised in Malaysia. So my background with footy has been very minimal. My dad's from Perth, however, so he has always kind of been talking about footy, and his footy culture has always been pretty present. So when I got older, he decided to enroll me in one of the very new women's classes or women's clubs that got established in Malaysia, which was called the Warrior Women's. So they kind of adopted me and they taught me everything about footy, and it was very, very beginner. So when I came to Perth to study, it was basically a whole new culture. I didn't know that footy could be so competitive, and going into the Amels Club at Curtin Wesley, they showed me what competitive footy and competing really felt like and looked like, and I loved it. It was great. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for me to see how far I could go. And then entering into East Freo, I really got a taste of what semi-professional sport could be like for women, especially in the whole footy area. And then, yeah, obviously got drafted. Lucky me.
Very exciting.
Very exciting.
So I saw that like the Malaysian AFL Warriors are the only, I believe, AFL club in Malaysia. Who do you guys play against then?
It's really interesting, actually. They probably are the only AFL team in Malaysia, but we have been able to kind of influence the rest of Southeast Asia. So we've got a couple of other teams and clubs within countries such as Cambodia, Singapore, Thailand, and I think it's once a year or once every 2 years they come together and they do like a little Southeast Asian championship. So that's really exciting, and it just gets a lot of girls around, Southeast Asia introduced to the game, and it's really, really fun to be a part of.
That's awesome. We've been chatting a little bit recently to AFLW in Ireland and some of their players and recruits, and it's just so nice to hear about how the sport in Australia has like made its way out to other countries.
Yeah, it's really good.
So forgive me for asking, but I'm going to assume that if you've managed to make it so far in the AFLW in football in such a short space of time, you probably were playing some sports before you picked up AFL in Malaysia. What were you doing? Did you have background in any other sports? Was there one that you really wanted to play and then AFL kind of popped up out of nowhere? What was your story there?
It was actually quite, looking back at it now, it was quite weird. I grew up going to a school that had, I think it was 200 kids attending the school. So it was a little German school based in Malaysia. And we didn't have any clubs or sports that had enough players to create a team. So you basically were introduced to every sport that the school offered. So I grew up playing soccer, doing swimming, playing volleyball. I really loved volleyball. I continued that here in Australia as well. But I kind of just stayed generally fit throughout all areas of sport. And I think that's really contributed to like being able to adapt to a sport quite quickly. Because yeah, once I got introduced to footy, which was, I don't know, 2017 or 18, I was just able to pick it up pretty quickly because I already had that hand-eye coordination from all the other sports I'd been playing, and I had the general fitness. And then obviously being as tall as I am, becoming a ruck and, playing that position was quite natural as well. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to be exposed to like basically every sport out there.
But footy's the first contact sport?
Yeah, it is. It is, yeah.
So that must have been a bit of a shock.
It was. We didn't really do too much contact back in Malaysia. So once again, coming here and playing Amos at, a very low level was already such a shock because the girls take it seriously and they really love it and they really get into it. But I don't know, once you're on the field, you kind of forget how much of a contact sport it is, and you just get into it, and everyone around you is motivated and dedicated yet safe. So everyone understands, and there's like a mutual understanding on the field.
So
I think, oh, there we go.
yeah, sorry. I was going to say is you were talking about some of the other players you got in the field with you. You've obviously now played a couple of seasons in the Waffle W out at East Fremantle. What's it been like in that squad with some ex AFLW ex and current AFLW players? I saw some of your highlights going around when you were drafted and you were tapping it right down the throats of Gabby O'Sullivan. What's that experience been like? And did that mean that this year, when it came around to the supplemental draft, you had a bit more of an idea of what was coming, or was it all just out of the blue?
Well, my first Waffle season, I didn't really pay attention to, or I don't think we were surrounded by many AFLW players. But once I paid attention to who was playing alongside me, it was very I was fangirling a lot. I was very excited to be playing against girls that have, done footy professionally and playing alongside people like Ashley Atkins and Gabby. It's been super fun and very, very educational, especially having Gabby in the midfield with me sometimes. She is very directional and she really helped me find, my footing in a lot of drills, and she's just a great person to be around. She's such a hype person. It's really, really great. But when it came to the drafting, I had no idea. She didn't give a single thing away. I don't think she even knew. I'm not sure. But yeah, it was very much a shock when I got drafted. I wasn't expecting it at all. I think one of our other girls at East Freo got drafted beforehand, Amber, but she went over to Melbourne, so we already knew that. But then when the supplementary draft came out, there was no expectations from me. So it was, very out of the blue.
Have you had much to do with your draft cohort over at Freo so far?
Not much. It's kind of still all very new. So you're in contact with a lot of people. You're trying to, separate your time and trying to delegate everything quite quickly. So I feel like we'll get time to definitely, work together more. But so far it's still very, very fresh.
So am I right in saying then that you really didn't hear much from any AFLW clubs before the draft, let alone Fremantle? So it was a bit out of the blue that you actually did get drafted.
Yeah, somewhat. I had been invited to. I knew that I was definitely in, I think it was the top 10 for Freo specifically. I hadn't heard anything from any other club. But Freo did ask me to come in for a medical and a bit of an interview. So obviously that gave me a bit of an idea that I was in the running. But I don't know, being young and naive and not very experienced, I really didn't think that, my first year of putting my name into the draft, that I'd be selected. So a bit of an idea, but also like a lot of doubt and a lot of surely not me. Surely it won't happen.
That's that would be such a cool experience to just go in with that naivety and then just having your expectations blown away when it happened. So that was a month ago. Have you
already
heard much from Fremantle since then about the upcoming season, and kind of have they given you anything specific about, what they're going to expect from you in the 2023 season, kind of positionally, what stuff they want to have you work on during the preseason, like just anything kind of, we'd love to know.
Yeah. So I've definitely been down to the club plenty of times already. We've had a couple of running sessions with the girls, some kicking sessions, some footy skill sessions. It's been really good to get around all the girls, get to know everyone, let everyone get to know me, get to know all the staff and the coaching team. So far, not much has been regarding like the actual positioning or anything. Right now, I think we're more focused on just getting me settled and getting the rest of the draftees settled in, the whole whirlwind that is AFLW. But I'm hoping I get to learn, much more about ruck, and that I get to, improve on my skills and my endurance to the point where I can adapt to many other positions. Like depending on where they want to put me, I'm eager to learn. So they've haven't given too much away. I'm sure that the preseason will be there for us discussing, what my goals are and what they would like me to work on and how they want me to improve. But right now, I'm just, eager to get in there and just do whatever I can.
Your volleyball experience and like the kind of like the tapping motion and your height is probably going to position you quite well for a bit of ruck opportunity there.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
So, being from WA and getting you've been playing in the Waffle, but Waffle was all WA based. Now you're in a national team. It's going to be a lot of travel given how few clubs there are in WA. How are you feeling about fitting in like the weekly travel and stuff with work and life and everything else?
I think it should be all right. I mean, I'm compared to a lot of the other amazing women I'm playing alongside. I have a very small schedule, very chill schedule. I'm just, your average uni student with a casual job. So I can really dedicate the majority of this coming season to footy. And I'm so excited to, you know, go over, travel. I've never been outside of WA when it comes to Australia. I've only ever traveled abroad. So I'm excited to see the rest of Australia itself.
That's cool.
And I'm excited. Yeah, it should be good. It should be really good.
Yeah, nice. I mean, it's a lot colder everywhere else, or wetter in Brisbane. So
Oh, don't tell me that.
You're in the best place.
Yeah.
It's also probably the opposite of what most of Australia has.
Oh,
most of
that's all
Australia
right.
has
I'm
like
still
only been on the
excited
East
to
Coast.
see. Yeah, true. Well, I've heard things, but it's still good to see both my own eyes. It'll definitely make me want to stay in Perth.
So, if we're going to ask you just one final question, what's the thing you're most looking forward to in your first season of AFLW? It could be kind of anything, playing an actual game, training with your teammates. Like, what are you most keen for?
I've been actually talking to my family about this. It's mainly just you never know how long your time in the AFLW will be. Like, obviously, getting this opportunity, I just want to soak everything up. I want to learn as much as I possibly can. Like, I want to know more about the sport, more about the culture, more about Australia, and yeah, just soak everything up. I want to learn as much as I possibly can. I'm just so intrigued with everything, especially being so new to the whole sport and the country itself. Like, I'm over the moon. I just can't wait to soak it all up.
Yeah, that's very exciting. You sound like an excitable, kid in a candy shop that's just like, I just want everything. I want all the experiences.
I am so excited. Oh, so good.
Such a good place to be.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's all that we've got to go through, but we will definitely be watching you come season. Anyone that we have the pleasure of interviewing for this podcast, we've become the biggest fans of. So you're on that list.
Thank you so much. No, I've been a fan of the podcast since, I found out about it, and I've been listening to you guys this season so far, and I can't wait to listen to the rest.